Hey everyone, Dumont Owen here. Today it's my distinct joy to have Ben Gioia back with us. Ben's done two previous talks and interviews about um, how to do great storytelling, and we're going to talk a lot more about it today. I'm going to leave a few minutes for those of you who are coming on board, and I will remind you of a couple of housekeeping things. One is that if you are watching from Facebook, the only way we will see who you are is if you go above this recording and give Facebook permission to use to show your information on StreamYard. Otherwise, you can be anonymous. We won't. We've talked to people who are anonymous, but if you want us to know who you are, so we can answer your questions, that would be great. And hold on, I want to make sure. Okay, it's 12:01. I'm going to go ahead and start, Ben. So, those of you who didn't meet Ben on his first two interviews, let me just briefly introduce you. Ben is a three-time international number one best-selling author. He trained millionaires, I love this, at Stanford and helped a Fortune 100 company create a video game for 20,000 employees. I mean, that is just so cool. I just love that. And he makes it so easy for coaches, consultants, and speakers, and just small business owners to get their book done in, get this, as little as 5 weeks. As little as 5 weeks. Now that's amazing. From there, it's going on to be a unique expert, enjoying six-figure speaking fees and getting clients and partners before you publish your book. That's one. I don't think anybody else is teaching that. I haven't heard of it anywhere. And then with 30, he has 38 years of writing experience, and he helped launch the world's largest magazine. And I didn't know this was the world's largest magazine, AARP. And its teachings are used by more than 50,000 people worldwide. So, Ben, thanks for coming back to see us again. You know, I think of this as like the trilogy, okay? And when I send this out, I'm also going to send the links to all of our previous interviews so that people can get the whole bit. So why don't we kind of start at the beginning? Why are stories so important?
Oh, thank you, Demont. Just want to preamble all of this with thank you for having me back for a third time. It's really been a lot of fun to be able to do this and
Great.
be able to give give this content to your people, and we get such wonderful audiences each time, both
Yeah.
live and in the recording. So thank you for that. It's been it's always a joy to come back to this stage, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's good to be back, and yeah. Why are stories important? It's funny. There's almost that instinctual reason of response of, well, of course they're important, right? But then you start digging, and it's like, okay, well, why are they important? And if you think about books and you think about your brand, you think about your business,
Hmm.
stories are one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, communication tool, that have been around longer than anything else, right? So
Yeah.
even before there were cave paintings, right? People were telling stories around the fire. People were making meaning of their experience, and that continues up until and will continue forever, for the whole of human existence, right?
Yeah.
And if we get into books and think about how storytelling impacts and books and book writing, stories are so important. And this is one of the biggest mistakes that people make in writing their book or in bringing their books to the world is that either they don't include enough stories, right? And what
Mhm.
happens is there's just a lot of information, right?
Yeah.
And people can't process that much information, right? It's there's this whole left brain, right brain thing going on,
Yeah.
where one part of our brain is all about the logic and the facts and the information. The other part of our brain is the, intuitive, creative part of our brains, and
Mhm.
those need to really be in harmony for our message to be effective, right? So sometimes people are just information heavy, right? And the reader might get some value from that information, but they're not going to be inspired, to take any kind of action. Probably not going to be inspired to take any kind of action because there wasn't the story there, and there wasn't that, what's the word, stoking of emotion and connecting
Mhm.
to what the reader wants and needs, not just from what they want in their brain, but what they truly want in their heart.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I remember years ago when I was working with students, one of the things I taught them when they were doing interviews was to answer with stories, because I'd been a recruiter and I'd been trying to remember people, and it was the ones who told me the stories that I remembered. So yeah, that's really powerful. So in the past we talked about signature stories,
Hmm.
and I'm wondering why we aren't talking, more about that today.
Yeah, thank you. So the first reason is practical. It's because we already talked about signature
Okay,
stories on another episode, and as you said, Dumont, you'll share the link with folks.
absolutely.
And the teaching that I did on signature story and the conversation that we had, that's a whole topic unto itself. I mean, even an hour is not enough for it. An hour is not
Sure.
enough for any of these things, but we do what we can with the time available. So, I encourage everybody who's watching, listening, catching this and recording, go check out the signature story stuff as well. And when I talk about signature story, just real quick for definitions here, signature story is that, that big story, that pivotal story that that we often share in our business, in our book, from the
Hmm.
stage, that very often will, exemplify our hard-earned wisdom. That will exemplify our transformation or our journey from some kind of mess to success. Right.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
signature stories are super important, very often because for people like you and me, people who are making a difference in the world through our business and through the people that we serve, right? That our signatures story is important for our audience, but it's also important for our content, right? Like very often the challenges that we overcome and the successes we create, are so embedded and so integral into what we're bringing forth, whether it's overtly through the content or kind of under the radar in just who we are and how we're presenting ourselves, right?
So
So
that's
that
really about brand also.
it is, yeah. Thank you for saying that, right? Signature story is very super related to brand, right?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So if we kind of go to the other side of the fence, so to speak, we're not going to talk about signature stories today because there are so many other stories, kinds of stories that are important for our books, right? That can be, stories about us, stories about the people we serve. It can be case studies. It
Hmm.
can be, a discovery from being on a bus one day, right? Like I often tell
Yeah.
the story of, I might have told this one time with you actually, right? I was standing on a bus, the front of a crowded bus in San Francisco, California, right? And I see we're at rush hour, we're stopped at the light, and I see a dog, or I see a, pardon me, I see a person walking a dog, a German Shepherd, across the intersection, and there's no leash on the dog,
Um,
right? And personally, I'm, freaking out on the inside because I think that dog's going to be hurt. Like, what if it
hmm.
runs? All sorts of traffic, bicycles, the whole
Hmm.
deal. And I said something to the bus driver. I said, that's really scaring the heck out of me. And she said, no. She said, I know. That's a wild animal, right? Like completely different perspective, completely different
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
view of the experience. And I never would have thought that that's a wild animal, right?
No,
Yeah.
no,
So
because you saw it walking with her.
exactly. So neither of us were wrong. We're just having two two different perspectives of that experience, based on our,
Yeah.
our history, based on our lives, based on, a million and one different factors. And I will often tell that story to show that difference between, you know, one situation, two different perspectives. And, if you think
Yeah.
about it, if you asked 12 people, 50 people, 100 people, there might be 100 different stories about
Mhm.
that experience right there. So these
Mhm.
smaller kind of stories are so important for our book, for our business, for what we teach, because they satisfy, the whole left brain, right brain harmony, and also give us an opportunity to, ground that information that we're sharing with people. Because what do they say? In selling back in the day, the facts tell, but the emotions sell,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And it's whether or not you like the word sell, just that understanding, is really really important for what we're doing here and why I'm sharing this today.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense to me. I'm wondering if you have anything that I know you brought a few things with you to share with our viewers, and I wonder if there. I wanted to stop here and give you an opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. So I have a couple slides that I want to go through, and don't worry, listeners and viewers, we're not this is not death by slideshow by any means, but I just want to bring forth a couple of this things that I'm trying to teach. So
Hmm.
Demont, I'm not sure if I can
Let's see. I
share
can
this.
add this
Oh,
first one. Is that
look at
it?
that. Yep,
Okay.
we did it. Yay! Thank you so much.
Teamwork.
Yeah, it's so nice when the technology works, right? Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to share a couple things and introduce myself a little bit more, and then also
Hmm.
teach as I'm showing some of the things for us
Hmm.
here today. So, whoops, let me start at the beginning here. So, as we all know, and Dumont, as you introduced today, this is beyond this. This is beyond the signature story, right? Because we're looking at, the smaller stories, the shorter stories, sometimes the supersized stories, but not all around that, pivotal story that we teach, right?
Hmm.
So in our time together, right, you're going to be discovering all sorts of fun things, which I'm really, really excited about. And, essentially, and I'm not fully reading from slides here, right? Just, so I might get some words wrong, but, essentially, you're going to discover the keys to using stories in a way that are going to, bring forth your message in a more powerful and potent way, and also, look at the other ways to use stories and,
Hmm.
leverage those teachings, leverage those experiences, for for the message that you want to bring forth. Right? The we're going to look at the the psychology of influence, and Dumont, I just got a message from you about an echo. I only have one mic going here.
I think it's on my end,
Okay, okay,
and I still haven't figured out what's going on.
okay, okay. Well,
I will talk very little.
okay.
All I can do.
Just talk enough here, right? Um, well, cool. Well, thank you. So as I like to do, and Dumont, as I know you like to do, is really give people all sorts of value, not just in what we're sharing with each other and with the group, but what kind of takeaways can be really helpful. And one of the funny little tiny stories that are really important that people don't think about in terms of stories are testimonials, right? Testimonials
Oh.
about our book, testimonials about our brand, our business, right? And how important they are not only for social proof, right, but also for being able to bring forth an experience for our reader, for our listener, that kind of thing. So, in service of that, and in service of the people that you serve, uh, inviting everybody to stick around to the end because I have this wonderful testimonials template that you can download. I'll show you how to get it, and it's basically plug and play. If you remember Mad Libs from back in the day,
Yeah.
right? Because you want to make it really easy for people to tell your story, right?
Hmm.
Or tell stories on behalf of you. So, you basically write a testimonial for them, which is like you're writing the story for them, send it to them and say, hey, I'd love a testimonial. I know you're super busy, so I wrote this for you. Please edit it or bless it, right? Or write your own. And 9 times out of 10, people will use the testimonial that you've written for them,
Yeah.
right? And
Exactly.
because they want to help you, right? There's nothing wrong with that. So take advantage of that. Take advantage of the fact that people want to help you and make it really easy for them. And remember that testimonials are little tiny stories about you and little tiny stories
Hmm.
about people's experience with you and how you serve them,
Yeah,
right?
and in fact, I got them, Ben, and they're fabulous. And
Yeah,
Debbie, who's on this call, used it to write a testimonial when she was in my class.
beautiful.
So, um, mute her. Is coming from her speakers on. Oh, maybe I can turn my speakers on.
Okay.
Keep going, and I.
Sure, sure. Yes, the background, you know, tech
Yeah.
excitement. I know how that goes sometimes. um, so today, as I hope with everything that I teach, today will change your life, and I believe it will with the storytelling because a lot of people, most people don't think about stories in these ways. So talking about using simple stories to leverage the psychology of influence, and I'll talk about what I mean by the psychology of influence. Learning how to connect the dots so more people say yes, and how to keep your reader turning the pages, or continuing to read your blog post, or watching the video, whatever the case may be. Right. So some of it, little spoiler alert. Some of it is the story itself that's going to keep somebody turning the page, right? And some of it is the very clear explication, if I can use a big vocabulary word, where you tell people, this is what this means to you. This is why this is important. Here's why I'm sharing this story.
Hmm.
Right here, this is how it's going to change your life. Right. So we never want to assume, not knocking people's intelligence, but we never want to assume people are going to get it, even if it seems to be clear as day. Especially in the case of our books, right? And especially in the case of, a blog post, a tweet, social media post, because people are moving so quickly, people get distracted, right? So the more we can help them understand, like, this is what's up, the better, we're serving them with our
Hmm.
stories and beyond, right? And, one example or one beautiful outcome that came from the stuff I teach around storytelling is one of my authors, Lorraine. She was writing her book with me. She was following my process, posted something on a blog, and a publisher reached out to her and asked her for a book proposal. Right. And one of the things, yeah, I mean, pretty amazing. So, you know, if you know me, I'm not a fan of traditional publishing, right? I'm
Right.
not knocking it, right? But I think for people like us, 9 times out of 10, right, not traditional publishing is the better way to go. That's a whole nother story. But the same rules apply, the same storytelling applies, right? So using these little nuggets was something that worked for Lorraine and something that can absolutely work for you, right?
Right.
And speaking of stories, I have to tell the story very quickly of how I got here, right? So, as you mentioned, some of this, I'm a 3 time international best-selling author, 38 years of writing and publishing adventures, right? World's biggest magazine, or at least it was at the time. Trained the 100 millionaires at Stanford and Sydney. That was after writing my book in 5 weeks, right? I created the first mindfulness program for the ALS Association. That's Lou Gehrig's disease. Stephen Hawking also had ALS, but
Yeah.
a variant, so he lived a lot longer with it. And then creating that mindfulness and empathy video game with this Fortune 100 company, right? Now
Yeah.
you'll notice something, or you may notice something, right? I just talked about my bio and some of my relevant highlights. Those are all little stories right there. Those are
Yeah. In fact,
all
I'm holding back from asking you.
right, champing at the bit, going, okay, I know
Yeah.
the answer. I know the answer. But really, I want to, underscore this as much as possible. You can tell stories in small amounts of space, right?
Hmm.
You can talk about your accomplishments, right? Use that as a story, present it as a story, and really think of it as a story as well. Um, Sorry, I just lost my screen. There we are. Thank you very much. Speaking of tech, um, so I can tell a story about the books that I've helped people write,
Yeah.
right? And I can tell a story of how top middle book Monica used the book before it was even published, right? Because I'm all about leverage of the book. Use the book to help her get a 5-figure speaking gig with a global healthcare organization, right? I can tell the story about Anne Marie, top right book, being brown in a black, bring, it's like a tongue twister right there, being brown in a black and white world, right? Where somebody from Google found her book and invited her to speak at Google.
Wow.
Yeah, so these are all wonderful things, and like hooray for me because I can share them for my business. But take all of you listeners, watchers, people in recording, right? Like take the deeper meaning here, right? Everything can be a story, right? And if you think about it that way, it really opens up the space because you know this is not about bragging. This is not about boasting. This is about connecting to what your people want and need and what's going to be most relevant to them and giving them the reason of why they should care, right? And then the beautiful line for almost any story, and this is a big one for the signature story, even though we're not talking about the signature story, right? Is that it wasn't always like this, right? People want to know that about your life, about your experience, about the fact that yes, you're successful right now, but when you help people understand it wasn't always like this, then it makes whatever level of success and achievement that you have, it levels the playing field,
Hmm.
right? It helps that person understand, even if they've had nothing remotely similar to your experience, suddenly they realize, the human connection. It's like, wow, I've not done anything like this person or not done it yet, but I get that this person is just like me, right? Because we're human beings at the core, right? So it breaks down those barriers between ourselves and the people we're serving, right? So for me, it wasn't always like this, right? I used to look like this at one point in my life. I used to do a whole lot of drugs in my life, right? I had experiences of traveling in India, the first time facing death 4 times in 72 hours, right? A bus almost going off a cliff and then running from a wildfire and then encountering a poisonous snake, right? And then running for or encountering a mountain lion, right?
That's wild.
Yeah, thank you. It is totally wild. And, right, the amazing thing is that each of those is a story, right? Like I just told one story or I just told 4 stories,
Hmm.
right?
Good point.
Yeah, I can say more about that. I can say less about that, right? It doesn't matter. Well, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, but strategically, I can go into depth. Strategically, I don't have to go in depth based on what somebody needs right at that point, right?
Hmm.
And speaking of depth, I can talk about the depth of my debt, right? Because after my experience in India, after coming back and going back a second time and hiking through the Himalayas for 12 days with blisters on my feet, or 9 days, pardon me, right? And understanding the difference between pain and suffering, right? Got my act together, came back to debt, all sorts of debt, right? And debt, I tell the story of debt because, A, it's part of my experience and part of my transition to success, but B, because debt is a very real experience for a lot of people,
Hmm.
arguably most people, and especially for those of us who are on the entrepreneurial path,
Right.
right? So for me, my book changed a lot of that stuff. And for me, a big part of that, of the success of the book, was the stories that I was telling in my book, right?
Hmm.
So, quick side note for everyone who's thinking about a book, getting, not having the book finished, right? You have to get it done. And I like to say you don't have to get it done. You have the privilege to get it done so you can share your story. And not only your signature story, but all these little stories that will help make your content more relevant for people, right? And make what you're teaching land, because again, the left brain, right brain stuff, the facts, the emotion, putting those together, in a harmonious way, really makes the learning stick, right? And the stories are what are going to help people remember what's going on. And not
Hmm.
only for your book, but think about a podcast, think about a keynote, right? That's the stuff that's going to be inspirational, right? But too much information, people don't get inspired, right? Too many stories without the information, right? People get the inspiration, but they don't know what the hell to do.
Right.
So you really have to find that bit in find that nice harmony. And
Uh,
things that I remind people, because I hear this a lot. I hear this with book writers. I hear this with entrepreneurs, right? People say, I don't have a story, or I don't have a story that, of like almost dying in India, right? It
right.
doesn't, everybody has a story. Everybody has lots of stories, right? Think of what's a story that either you think about or tell your people often, right? It doesn't have to be a big, exciting thing, right? One of the other stories I tell my clients is my experience of investing $10,000 in Facebook ads and Facebook, ad management, for a result of zero sales, right?
That's
That's
not an uncommon experience either.
exactly. Unfortunately, yeah. So yes, you have a story. Yes, you have many stories, right? Just allow yourself to recognize that
Hmm.
and bring them into the mix, right? So myth number two, that the stories have to be long. They don't have to be long. I keep hitting on that today. Right?
Yeah.
And I'll keep hitting on that. Myth number three, my business isn't interesting, right? First of all, interesting, I think, is a judgmental word, or is a word
Hmm.
of judgment. Let me say it like that, right? Your book doesn't have to be, pardon me, your business doesn't have to be interesting, right? Your book business just needs to be interesting to the people that you serve, right? Accounting might not be interesting,
Right.
right? But it's vitally important to the people that you serve, right? So
Yeah.
remember that.
I know in branding, we say that you don't have to be famous, you have to be selectively famous.
Ooh, I love that. That nails it right there. So
Yeah.
yeah, so selectively famous. Thank you. Right. And then some people I hear, well, my life isn't interesting. I never went to India, or whatever the thing is, right? This is not about interesting or not. This is about, what are the nuggets? What are the stories? What are the experiences that are going to resonate with your people in the best possible ways, right? What's going to help your people, understand that piece of information, right? When somebody, gives a concrete example of, I can't think of an example right now, but something scientific where they, talk about how big, the distance between like an electron and a nucleus in an atom, right? Equivalently is like one side of the galaxy to the other,
Right.
right? That's a story right there, right? So don't overcomplicate this. Don't think you don't got it, and make use of it, right?
Hmm.
And then the fifth myth: nobody's going to care. People will absolutely care, right? As long as the stories are relevant to your people, to what they want, to the challenges that they want to overcome, right? Your audience, if you talk to them, I hope you talk to your audience, right? Your people will tell you what they want. They'll tell you the challenges that they are having. They'll tell you sometimes how they want to get to the goal, right? So
Mhm.
use story to support that trajectory. And the last one, I don't have enough stories to share. Oh, yes, you do. Right? If you are still living and breathing, you have enough stories to share, right? You don't need 4,000 stories for your business, right?
Right.
Dozen stories or so, right? Like to just enough to connect to the most important parts of what your people want and need, right? And to really connect with what's going to be most resonant to them, even if it doesn't feel exciting. Because very often, our stuff, right, the stuff I teach, the stuff you teach, we've been teaching it for years, if not decades. It's
Mhm.
not always going to feel exciting to us or interesting to us, right? I tell that India story a lot in different ways. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm just telling the India story again. But at the same time, the people who've never heard it are just like, oh my God,
Wow. Yeah,
right? So,
absolutely.
yeah, so thank you. So let me, if we, do you mind if we can
Just move that.
unshare?
There we go.
And
And thank you so much because Ben, that was so interesting, and I know how important storytelling is. It's been a challenge to me, but I'll tell you, I've been following what you write, and I'm starting to understand how to do it.
oh,
You
right
know,
on.
so
Thank
so
you.
yeah. So anyway, I was wondering because I once heard that you could tell, or that someone told a story in 6 words. Is
Mm-hmm.
that true? I mean, it seems impossible.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's funny. I first discovered the 6 word story. Speaking of stories, in my mom's bathroom, right? Because I was there, and there's a pile of books in the basket, and I start leafing through the books, and there's this book called Word Stories, and I'm sorry I can't remember the author right now, but I started taking a look around, our friend the internet, and I think it was, at least as far as the legends go, Ernest Hemingway had made a bet with some of his friends around dinner at some point, and basically, I don't know if somebody challenged him or if he challenged them, and I said I can write a story in 6 words, right? And they're like, no way. And by the end, he had written a 6 word story on the back of a napkin, right, and brought that forth, right, and won the bet, of course. Yeah.
So, what was
So
the story?
oh gosh, that I can't tell you right now because I didn't commit that one to memory.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was one about baby shoes, and I was wondering if that was.
You know what? That might be it. Thank you, because I was reading several of them today, and I grabbed a selection for our conversation today that I am going to share, but I didn't grab that one, and
I,
they're all kind of a jumble in my brain at this point.
I think I learned that because I was an English major,
Mm-hmm.
and if it's the one I'm thinking about, it was baby shoes for sale, never worn.
Oh yes, yes. Yeah, I can't remember. I mean, if that was Hemingway or somebody else, but I did
Yeah.
actually read that one today. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
The one I know. So,
yeah, yeah, and thank you for having a better memory than me. I appreciate that very much.
and I'm
um,
not sure it was Hemingway either.
that's okay. We'll
Everybody
get
can look it up.
yes, exactly. We'll give Papa Hemingway his due in some way, shape, or form. But I appreciate you saying that because it's interesting because similar to some of the things that I was saying before, right? Like those 6 words could stand alone as a story,
Hmm.
on the one hand, or they could be the beginning of an entire novel or anything in
Oh yeah,
between.
I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really something, the power of words. And I think there's so much of a what's the word, tendency, habit, probably a few other things, fear and doubt, where we spend so much time over explaining things,
Mm-hmm.
right, in our marketing, in our books, right, from the stage, in a video, right, and we're trying to make the point, and of course we want to be clear with our stuff. We want to help the reader understand. We want to connect the dots, like I was saying before, right. We want to use that psychology of influence, right, but sometimes, oftentimes, we just overdo it. And I think that's, at least I'll speak for me, I think that's left over from school, right. It's just, we were told to write these 10-page term papers,
Oh yeah.
right, and to put the thesis statement and go through the whole thing and then recap it and the footnotes and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, there certainly can be a benefit for that and a time and place for that, but most of the time, for the kinds of things that you and I are sharing through our books, through our message, in a branding context, right? We don't want to get heavy-handed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really risky. And I think that's a beautiful segue into the before I share the 6 word story examples, to foundationalize it, if you will, in the psychology of influence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we
Would you
think
like?
about influence, and I like to think about, at the risk of tooting my own horn, right, the idea of influence with a heart, right? So inspiring someone to say yes, inviting them to say yes, but doing so in a way that's really a win-win-win, right? That
Mm-hmm.
is a win for you, is a win for them, and ideally that's a win for everybody else in the mix, right? The rest of humanity, the planet, the whole deal,
Yeah.
right? So how do we do that kind of, how do we bring forth that kind of influence, right? So there's a fantastic book, Dumont, I don't know if you ever read, from Robert Cialdini, called Influence. That
Mm-mm.
was one of the yeah, I think canonical, if you will, books, and one of the first things that I ever learned about from my first mentor, right? Someone named Robert Cialdini is the author, Cialdini,
Hmm.
and he is a professor at a couple of universities, maybe both in Arizona, if I'm remembering correctly. And he did a lot of study around influence, like what makes people say yes, or what opens the door for people to say yes. And his motivation, uh, I thought, was in integrity, right, which is what we're all about here.
Right.
Right, it was to help people understand the reasons why, so people like us not only could inspire and educate people, so we can help change their businesses and lives,
Mm-hmm.
but also so we can not say yes to the things that we shouldn't be saying yes to, right? Because sometimes there's languaging, there's perspective, there's pressure, there's all sorts of things, and we want to say yes because we feel compelled to say yes, right? And it's like, wait, that's probably not a good idea. And we have so much human psychology, right? So much habituation. We have religion, culture, school, right? We can kind of go down the list. Like, there's so many things that predispose us to just acting unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start to understand, what are some of the triggers, or what are some of the, precipitating events or experiences, then we can make a better choice, right? And one of my favorite examples of this, and this one still blows my mind. Like, as I'm thinking about it, I'm going, holy crap, right? That there was at a university, Cialdini did this study. At a university, people are making photocopies of stuff. Like there's the lineup of people, the queue for all of our European viewers, right? There's the queue of people who are going to make their photocopies, and somebody comes to the front of the line, and they say, can I get in front of you to the next person, right? So as the story goes, or as the study goes, more accurately, there was a very small percentage of the time, like minuscule, that the person in front would say okay, right? Most of the time they're like, no way, right? So then they did another, set of, they ran the experiment a few more times, and the next time when the person made the request, can I go in front of you? They would say, can I go in front of you because I have a class that's starting in 5 minutes, right? So here's this reason. So there was a much higher incidence, if you will, or allowance of people, a sure thing. I forget what the numbers were, but it was, something like, let's say 62%. So
Hmm.
pretty high, and, nice people, nice considerate humans,
Right.
etc. Right. And, the power of helping understand the reason why, right? Can I do this because of this, right?
Hmm.
So then, and this is where it gets crazy, extra crazy, right? The request was, can I or can I get in front of you? Can I go next? However they said it. Can I go in front of you because? And they ended the sentence right there.
Huh.
And something like 60% of the people said yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so just the B word, right? All this kind of behavior, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating. So I'm saying this for several reasons. One, because it's an amazing story, right? Number two, the power of the word because. So everybody, please use it in your books, use it in your blogs, use it in your articles, put them
Mhm.
up, put it on your website, right? This is what I mean by connecting the dots,
Yeah.
right? Don't assume people are going to understand, even if it's clear as day, even if you think it's clear as day, right?
Yeah. And I know I'm guilty of that.
Right? Yeah, it's really something. And if we look at what Cialdini was teaching, kind of unpacking, the actual psychology of influence, there were six pieces or six components to it, and the first four, which are the important ones for our purposes, right, and are the knowing, the liking, the trust, and the authority, right?
Mhm.
So, if you've been in this world, even for a minute, we often hear about knowing, liking, trusting.
Yeah, I noticed you added that authority.
Yep, yep, yeah. So no like trust is, I think, how Cialdini has kind of weaved his way into our culture, right?
Hmm.
Because everybody and their mother is talking about knowing, liking, trusting, but that fourth component, or that fourth, principle, I think that's how he talked about him. Authority, right? That if you want somebody to say yes to you, right, they want to feel like they know you, even if you've never met. Some sense of they know you. Hey, I'm also from New York. Oh, right. That they like you. That one can be a little bit more subtle because some snap judgments, right? Oh, I don't like your hat, right?
Hmm.
Whatever the case may be. That I trust you, vitally important. For somebody to say yes, not only to make that investment with us, but that somebody trusts us enough to open up our email, right, or to click like on a LinkedIn article, right?
Hmm.
So subtle, so powerful. And then authority, really, really important, especially in this world, like for those of us who want to stand out as an expert, as an authority, as a thought leader, right? If we want people to say yes to us, more people to say yes to us more often, right? We need to have those four things operating: the knowing, the liking, the trust, and the authority.
And the authority.
Yeah, and that's why storytelling is so important. And
Yeah, because
yeah,
it tells how you got here and why and all those big things. And that authority or credibility too, that's another way. Is so important on social media,
yeah, yeah,
you know.
it really is. Yeah, and you know, it is one of the great differentiators, right? And I like to say to people, you know, you don't have to be the top expert in anything, right? Because it's entirely too much pressure, I think. Like why? Right? But just
Yeah.
be a unique expert in your space, in the stuff you teach. You know, be a unique expert in the way that only you can be that unique expert or authority, right? Because there's never been anyone like you. There will never be anyone like you, right? There's nobody else that has your skills, your experience, your expertise, you know, the stories. You know, nobody else was on the bus that day, you know,
Hmm.
looking at that German Shepherd crossing the street like you were with your perspective, right?
Absolutely. And so much of what you have said relates to branding too. You know, I mean, they're intertwined there. You know, being unique rather than being the best, because there are going to be other experts who do what you do. You just have to be unique and relevant. I mean, we could just talk about Brandon's story forever. But I wanted to ask you one more thing, because I've heard you say, and I forgive me, I'm not sure what the context was, but you were talking about the special sauce.
Yep.
Can
Yeah.
you?
Thank you. Yeah. So special sauce is my term. I mean, I'm sure some other people use it, but you know, special sauce is my term for that whole combination of the skills, the experience, the expertise, the hard-earned wisdom, the credentials. You know, if you have them, and if you don't, that's okay, right? But that whole melange of stuff, right? That's the stuff that's going to really help you stand out. And you know, so this is why it's so important to be able to have all of these different kinds of stories available, and not only have, you know, have different kinds of stories available, but specifically what are the stories that are going to be most resonant and relevant to your people, to the outcomes they want, you know, to the
Mhm.
challenges that they want to overcome. You know, what are the stories that you know, speak to who you are, you know, as that expert. What are the stories that help people know you and like you and trust you, you know? And not that you have to do it in 6 words, right? But that you definitely can do it in 6 words, right? And you know, even if it's not 6 words, that you can pack a lot into a small space. I mean, look at a tweet, right? 280 characters. That's that's a bit more than 6 words. Like, you can do a lot in that space.
Yeah, well, just with LinkedIn invitations, if you add a note, you've only got 300 characters, including the white spaces.
Right? Yep. Beautifully said. Yeah, it's incredible, like how, in some ways, you know, the short attention spans that, you know, a lot of us experience, that a lot of us deal with, um, the that technology and social media adapts in, you know, hey, you can only use this much space. And in some ways, you know, there's the drawback of the short attention span and the dopamine hits and the whole deal. And on the other hand, it really forces you to get to the point, right? And that can really help a lot in the noise,
Hmm.
right? Because if people can get, you know, they don't, you know, people don't need to, you know, from 6 words sign up for your year long mastermind. Like, it's not going to be like that, right? But
Right.
it's enough for them to go, oh, Oh, I get that. Or let me find out more. Right?
Yeah.
I like the example of uh, a cascading waterfall, if you will. Right? It's like the water is not spilling from the top to the bottom, right? But it's just a little bit of water falls here, pools here, etc. Pools here, etc. Like that's how these little stories can work, right? And support your content. And all you need to do, and sometimes easier said than done, right? Just a headline that just gets the person interested enough to open up the email, right?
Hmm.
And then an opening paragraph that gets the person interested enough to read the next paragraph, right? And just like that, right? So sometimes there's so much pressure around, like, I have to write this great thing, I have to do this amazing video, I have to write this stellar Pulitzer Prize winning book, and it's like, wait a minute, all you have to do is get them to the next yes, right? Because every big yes is a series of little yeses if you think about it,
Hmm.
right? So the more you can invite people to say yes, and now I'm actually going to talk about the fifth Cialdini principle, actually the sixth, which is consistency, right?
Another
The,
branding term too.
right on, yeah, and consistency in this context, I'm not sure about the branding context, but in this context is that people want to behave in the way that they've previously behaved. So if somebody said yes to you in the past, they're a little bit more likely to want to say yes to you again. So if you can keep inviting them to say yes, take a look at my email, read this blog post, come like my page, hey, come buy my book, right? By the time you're getting to the point of, hey, I'd like to invite you to come talk about my mastermind, right? And help you get your book done and published and monetized, all those kinds of things, right?
Right.
Then that big potential yes, is not such a big potential yes, but it's this series of smaller yeses that's helped this person really be in the space to be ready for what you're offering to them.
That makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody put it quite that way.
Right on. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. We humans and our brains and the whole psychology of this, and what I remind myself and try to bring forth in my books and everything that I teach is that influence is powerful stuff, right?
Hmm.
And in the wrong hands, right, used the wrong way, it screws things up, right? There's look at history, look at the world today, right? There's a lot
Yeah,
of
since I mean, yeah,
yeah. But then the flip side of that, if you will, is that if you think about influence, in the hands of somebody like you, somebody like me, the people who are watching this, live and in recording, you in recording, you
yeah,
here right now, like influence in your hands, and knowing how to, leverage the, leverage the psychology behind it, very simply and straightforwardly. How do you invite people again and again and again to know you, to like you, to trust you, to see you as an authority, not because you're boasting, but to help them feel comfortable and help them enter into the space of being able to say yes so they can have their lives changed by who you are and what you offer.
wow, that this has just been so great. And I notice you have your, I'm sorry for this continued echo. You have your website, influencewiththeheart.com. Can people find out more about this by going there?
Uh, Absolutely. So there's definitely some blog posts. There's definitely training on this, and gosh, one thing that everybody can do if or at least if you're like, oh my god, I got to get my book done by the end of this year, right? Because I know some people, some of you are right, like, all right, already, let's get it done. I'm actually doing a short book course starting October 4th, right? And that's available at 5 week book mastery, the number 5weekbookmastery.com. That's a great option if you want to have a manuscript done by, before
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, right? Before the middle of November. That's a beautiful option.
And I've
Another,
talked to some, I just wanted to say, I've talked to some of your students before, and they really got so much out of this and made so much
thank you.
progress, and on their books. So I just wanted to say that's just something that I arrived at just in talking to them.
Well, thank you. I appreciate hearing that, and it's always good to hear it from the outside. It's right. Okay, it's working. Yay!
Hmm.
Right, people are
Hmm.
getting value. Yeah, and if right now is not the time, to get your book done, like I totally get it. A great way to start playing with stories and also, beef up your business a little bit is to use those testimonials that I talked about before, right? So you can get the template at bookreviews.cc. Once again, that's bookreviews.cc. And the instructions are right there. The template is really easy to use. I've been using it for years, and it literally has changed my business because one of my favorite things is to help people who I know are doing good in the world. One of the greatest ways to do that is with a testimonial,
Yeah.
right? Especially doing LinkedIn testimonials. And somebody
Yeah.
asks me, and I'm like, "Yep, I can do that." Right? Just pull
No
out the
problem.
template. Exactly.
That's great.
Exactly.
I remember back when I was teaching in higher ed, what students would go through trying to get their faculty to give them recommendations.
Right.
And I would always say, read it for them and then give them a draft. So there was, I wanted to ask you again, there was and I didn't get it fast enough. You gave another address and I wanted to put in there, another
Oh,
URL.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you. The other one is I have my published position and profit master plan deep dive that'll be happening in November. So two ways to join that. One is if you join the book course, you get a ticket to that for free, as part of the program because, it makes sense after you write the book. What the hell do I do with it, right? Right. So that's the intent of the week. But if it makes more sense to just come to that deep dive weekend, and I call it a deep dive because it's super intimate, less than 20 people, and we figure out a roadmap for your book, right? Help you understand how to navigate the publishing world, how not to spend $63,000 on a book. I'm not kidding when I say that. Yeah, right? I mean, so we teach all that stuff, and that's at publishpositionandprofit.com. Once again, publishpositionandprofit.com. And both of those events are going to be here before we know it because
Yeah, I mean,
time is a crazy thing.
yeah, we're just about there. So, and I will also put these in the recordings,
Thank you.
so that people will have that.
Appreciate that.
So, you did promise that you would show them one more thing. No, I guess no. Yeah,
Was it the book reviews?
I don't know. I'm seeing something here. I don't know. Oh wait, that's Kresge. That's what I'm doing. Never mind.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you can download the book reviews. They're great. I've already used some of them. They really are great. So, Ben, I wanted to thank you. I wanted to just quickly see if we have a lot of positive comments. If anybody has questions, we've got a little bit. Oh, thank you. Rusty just puts everything in there. So
Beautiful.
Rusty is my fabulous CA. He's
Thanks,
amazing.
Rusty.
So, so
Yeah,
anyway, Ben, thank you so much.
you're welcome.
This
Thank you.
is always just a thrill. You are way up there in my people to interview. It's always such fun, and I always learn so much.
Thank you.
So, um,
Been my pleasure.
yeah, yeah. So I guess we will call it a day.
Okay,
Bye
that
for now,
sounds great.
folks.
Okay, bye everybody. Thank you so much. Take good care.